Yeah, I'm Madonna, the queen of pop, the woman who turned scandal into strategy, noise into music, and 1,000 reinventions into one stubborn career. But before the lights and cameras, before the award shows and the headlines and the stadiums that vibrate like living creatures, there was a counter, a paper hat, a name tag that didn't fit, and a jelly machine that absolutely did not respect me. I'm talking about my short, glorious, catastrophic career at Dunkin Donuts, the job I lost in a single day. Not a week, not a shift and a half. One day. Blink and you'd miss it. A career speed run, if you will. Fired before the coffee cooled. And the funny part? That little disaster taught me more about who I am than a dozen triumphs ever could. I didn't arrive in New York as a pop star. I arrived as a 19-year-old with a bus ticket, a stubborn soul, and $35 that had to stretch like yoga. Michigan felt too small for the size of my hunger. I wanted art that bit back. I wanted a city that didn't pat me on the head but shoved me in the chest and asked, "You sure?" New York did not disappoint. It greeted me with a handshake made of humidity, sirens, and sidewalks that smelled like ambition and heat and yesterday's mystery. The city announced its terms immediately. Rent first, dreams later. I nodded, like someone about to sign a contract she hasn't read. Fine, rent first. But I wasn't going to forget why I'd come. My first apartment was less an apartment and more a thin suggestion that shelter might be possible if you believed hard enough. The ceiling peeled like an old sticker. The radiator hissed like a cat with opinions. My roommate was a musician who practiced at impossible hours and owned exactly 2 cooking utensils, a dented pot and a fork with one brave tine. We shared groceries that weren't groceries so much as concepts. Bread, but mostly the idea of bread. We improvised dinners that tasted like optimism and salt. And every morning, the city knocked on the window, sometimes with sun, sometimes with gray, but always with that dare. Are you still here? Jobs were auditions of a different kind. Every "will let you know" was just another way of saying, "Can you survive long enough to try again?" I saw a help wanted sign at Dunkin Donuts and said yes before the word no could find me. They accepted me with open arms and a closed wallet. Training was simple. Smile like caffeine in human form, don't drop anything, and take the jelly machine seriously. I failed 2 of those immediately. The uniform was brown in the way that a bruise is brown, and the paper hat folded my hair into a shape no mirror should have to see. But I told myself it was temporary. One day I'd trade that paper hat for a crown made of stage lights. For now, I was paid in dollars and humility. My first customers were blur people, faces sliding past in a parade of regular coffee, 2 sugars, and 1 glazed. I said, coming right up like a robot with questionable wiring. I tried to look grateful, and sometimes I was. Grateful for the dollar in the tip jar, for the way my hands could remember movement even when my brain wanted to run back to the piano. But there was a voice in my head that never stopped humming. You are not a counter, you are a chorus. The voice was right and incredibly inconvenient. Then came the machine, the jelly injector, center of my legend. It sat there like a harmless toy, shiny and full of possibilities. Put donut in, press lever, deposit a small, polite amount of jelly. Science, order, discipline. I'm not famous for choosing any of those. I thought, what happens if I press a little longer? What happens if I believe in abundance? What happens if the donut becomes a galaxy and the jelly a comet? Here is what happens. Trajectory meets hubris. The jelly exited the donut, the nozzle, and the realm of responsible behavior. It sailed like a crimson comet across the counter and made first contact with a customer's immaculate white shirt. There are moments you can't unsay, and there are stains you can't unsee. This was both. I laughed. Of course I did. It was absurd. Beautifully, perfectly absurd. The customer did not share my artistic vision. My boss appeared from the back like a storm cloud with keys. His face practiced a shade of red that would have impressed a tomato. He asked me what I thought I was doing. I told him the truth. I was making a moment. He told me another truth. My moment was over. He took my hat like a judge taking a gavel and said I was through. Fired. Day 1. Jellygate was complete. You might think I walked out devastated. I didn't. I walked out lighter, like someone who just realized tight shoes are the problem, not her feet. Yes, I needed the money, and yes, humiliation has a spice to it that burns on the way down. But the second I stepped into the street, the air felt like a promise. I'm not supposed to be there, I thought. Not behind that counter, not apologizing to shirts. I am supposed to be loud and wrong, and then right on a stage where mistakes become choreography. That day was a rejection letter signed by destiny. Dear Madonna, the uniform doesn't fit. Try something louder. Of course, louder doesn't pay rent either. So I hustled. Waitress at a diner that specialized in coffee and chaos. Coat check at a club where the coats had more money than their owners. Dancer in rooms that smelled like sweat and wishes. If there was a job that asked for patience, I failed spectacularly. If there was a task that asked for rhythm, I excelled. Customers taught me about timing, even when they didn't mean to. The man who snapped his fingers for a refill taught me how to pause, smile, and take his power without touching it. The woman who complained that her soup was too wet taught me that some people will invent reasons to be unhappy and invite you to join their play. I declined the role. Dinners were experimental. Popcorn again, spiced with desperation and whatever seasoning packet I could steal. Bananas when they were cheap, ramen when it was on sale, both when it was a holiday. I learned every aisle of the discount grocery like a meditation labyrinth. The store clerk and I developed a friendship based on coupons and stubbornness. On nights when I had nothing, I reminded myself that nothing is just a strange word for not yet. You can dress not yet in lipstick and it becomes almost glamour. Rejection arrived on schedule. Auditions that felt like lotteries, producers who pretended to yawn, musicians who promised calls that never learned my number. Some people said my voice wasn't a voice so much as a dare. Others said my look was too much or not enough, which is a confusing sentence until you realize that what they mean is, you make me feel something I didn't ask for, and that scares me. I took their fear and turned it into a ladder. Every no was a rung. The climb was awkward, but it was a climb. Tiny clubs became my classrooms. Sticky floors, crappy microphones, bathrooms that doubled as dressing rooms and emergency confessionals. I sang to 10 people like they were 10,000, and to 10,000 later like they were 10 friends. I learned that charisma is just refusal dressed up, refusal to shrink, refusal to apologize for wanting more sound than your throat can hold. I learned that a hook isn't only a melody. It's a sentence that lands like a tattoo. I learned to love the moment between the first note and the first cheer, that inhale before belief. When I was alone, I practiced the art of delusion, which is just a glamorous word for faith. I'd sit on a windowsill with a notebook, inventing futures that felt ridiculous at the time. Music videos, world tours, interviews where people mispronounced my name, but still tried. I pictured magazines with my face on them and wrote fake cover lines to amuse myself while the radiator clicked out a rhythm. I rehearsed greetings to talk show hosts who didn't know me yet. Dreaming is free. I overdosed on it and never paid a hospital bill. But let's be honest, it wasn't all romance and grit. There were days when I wanted to quit, when the word hustle felt like an insult with a good haircut. There were mornings when the city felt like it was pushing back with both hands and both knees and a forehead for emphasis. I cried. In New York, you can cry on the sidewalk and no one asks why. They just step around your puddle and keep moving. That's not cruelty. That's a survival technique. The city assumes you'll stand up on your own because you have to. And if you don't, the city doesn't apologize, because it never promised you anything. Let me tell you a secret about that donut incident. I replayed it in my head 100 times, not because I regretted it, but because it felt like a metaphor with sprinkles. You put something soft under pressure and hope it holds. Sometimes it bursts, and everyone gets sticky. People pretend this is a disaster. Sometimes it's a beginning. What bursts doesn't always break. It can reveal. The jelly wasn't a mess, it was a confession. I wasn't built for neatness. I was built for spectacle and sincerity, for making a scene and then making it mean something. If you're wondering whether I ever imagined staying at Dunkin, I did, for exactly 3 minutes on a particularly hungry afternoon. I pictured myself as a manager with a key ring heavy enough to count as jewelry. I pictured friendly regulars who called me by name, calendars full of schedules, holidays measured in seasonal donut flavors. I pictured teaching new employees how to respect the jelly machine like a sacred text. And then I laughed so hard I had to sit down. The fantasy dissolved like sugar and coffee. Some lives are beautiful, for someone else. Mine needed a stage, not a schedule. The turning points weren't fireworks. They were small, stubborn flames that refused to go out. A musician friend introduced me to a producer who didn't roll his eyes. A club owner extended my set by 5 minutes, and I squeezed a miracle into that space. A single caught the kind of attention that means the phone rings without you calling it. None of it happened overnight. It felt like climbing a staircase in the dark. You don't see the landing, you feel the next step with your toes and trust it not to vanish. One day, the light switched on, and I realized I'd been mounting a stage for years without knowing where the fourth wall was. Fame is an echo that starts as a whisper. At first, it's your own voice bouncing back from brick. Then it's strangers repeating your name like a dare. And then it's a roar that threatens to drown out the thing that made it start. The music, the risk, the jelly. The trick is to keep the original whisper in your pocket, to unfold it when the noise gets arrogant. Mine says, you came here to make something loud enough to outsing silence. It doesn't say, be nice. It doesn't say fit, it says invent. People ask me about confidence like it's a gift you receive. Confidence is a bruise you keep pressing to see if it still hurts. Confidence is swallowing rejection without letting it become your accent. Confidence is standing in a bad uniform on your first day and thinking, "This isn't me," and then proving it by walking toward a life that won't let you be anything else. I didn't become brave. I stayed stubborn long enough to forget I was scared. If you've never been hungry, literally hungry, you might think hunger is poetic. It is not. It's a negotiation with your body about what matters most today. Rent or protein, bus fare or fruit. It sharpens you until you can cut through excuses without a knife. It made me inventive. I wrote songs on empty stomachs and filled them with rhythm. I learned that a chorus can taste like breakfast if you sing it right. I don't romanticize it, but I won't erase it either. It was a teacher I didn't like, but I learned. There were kindnesses too. A friend who slipped me a Metro card and said it fell out of the sky. A bartender who let me rehearse a cappella after closing with the bar stools flipped like sleeping bats. A neighbor who pretended not to notice when I borrowed her salt again, and again, and again. Critics love to pretend that one person is a force of nature, unassisted. That's mythology. Every rising star is a constellation of hands, glances, and small approvals that keep the heart from defaulting to doubt. I know the legend now. Madonna, the provocateur, the manipulator of image, the woman who sees the culture and flips it like a table. That's not wrong, but it's not the whole thing. Under the spectacle is a worker. Under the glamour is grit. Under the confidence is 1,000 little humiliations that I refuse to let define me. The jelly moment is funny because it's true. I made a mess and got fired. I also refuse to let the mess be the period at the end of my sentence. I turned it into a comma, then a chorus. So when you see me in a video wearing something that makes your grandmother whisper a prayer, understand this. It comes from the same impulse that pressed the jelly lever too long. Curiosity, defiance, the desire to see what happens when you refuse the minimum. Sometimes it stains, sometimes it starts a movement, sometimes both. I can live with that. I've been asked, what's the moral? The moral is not, don't press the lever. The moral is, know what you were born to press. Some people were born for spreadsheets and thank God for them. Some were born to heal bones, build bridges, teach algebra to teenagers who'd rather nap. I was born to push buttons, literal, metaphorical, cultural, and then stand there, hands sticky, and own it. I didn't come to New York to be careful. I came to be undeniable. If you're standing at your own counter right now, whatever it looks like, and you feel that itch under your name tag, pay attention. That itch is a map. It won't tell you the route. It will tell you the direction, away from what makes you smaller, toward what makes your voice inconvenient. And if along the way you blow jelly across the room and ruin a shirt, apologize if you must, but don't apologize to yourself. Some shirts exist to be sacrificed to a better story. Do I wish I had lasted longer at Dunkin? Not for a second. Do I wish I had been more polite? Not particularly. Polite wouldn't have fed me. Polite wouldn't have made me brave. Polite never wrote a chorus that stuck in a stranger's head on a bus and made them miss their stop. I chose loud over likable, and I'd choose it again, every time. Being liked is a weather report. Being yourself is climate. One last confession. Every time I pass a donut shop, I smile. Not because I want a donut, though sometimes I do, but because I remember the girl in the ugly uniform who didn't belong there and knew it. She was already me, just quieter. She had the same spine, the same appetite, the same ridiculous belief that the world would eventually dance to her song. The difference between then and now is not destiny, it's duration. I stayed in the fight long enough for the fight to become choreography. So yes, I was fired from Dunkin Donuts on my first day. And yes, it was my fault. And yes, I would do it again if it meant learning the same lesson with the same speed. Reject the room that rejects your rhythm. Keep the joke, keep the bruise, keep the story, and keep going. Before the spotlight, there's always a job. Sometimes it's the one that convinces you to never ever settle for anything less than the stage you were born to build with your own two stubborn hands. And if your path ever takes you past a jelly machine, and you feel that twitch in your finger, and you wonder what would happen if you pressed just a little longer, you already know the answer. The room will get messy. Someone will frown. Someone else will laugh. You might get fired, or you might get free. Either way, you'll have a story. And maybe that story will be the first verse of the life you were meant to sing.